My name is Cora Miller. I'm 33 years old, and to many people who used to know me, I was probably just the youngest daughter who dropped out and played around with those useless online things. But everything changed on the night of my father's 60th birthday. Professor Thomas Miller, who had lectured for over 30 years at a prestigious university in Texas, in the lavish setting of a mansion nestled in one of Dallas's wealthiest neighborhoods, crystal chandeliers reflected red wine, gentle laughter blended with soft jazz music, and then he stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You're no daughter of mine. Get out of this house right now." The music stopped. All conversation ceased. I simply raised my glass to eye level and smiled lightly. Fine. Tomorrow I'll be heading back to my $45 million mansion in Florida. Not a single person dared to say a word. Have you ever been disowned by the very person who gave you life in front per news? Of everyone? Have you ever stood in the middle of what should have been family, only to feel like a stranger? If you've ever been dismissed, pushed out of a life you worked so hard to belong to, leave a comment below. Hit like if something about this makes your chest tighten, and don't forget to subscribe so we can see this story through to the end. Because from that moment on, I never looked back. And my story was only just beginning. I was born into a family where academic success was the measuring stick of human worth, where framed diplomas mattered more than compassion, personal interests, or dreams that didn't fit the mold. My father, Thomas Miller, was a seasoned professor of political science at a renowned university in Austin. His hair was always neatly combed, his tie never off-center, and even his footsteps in the hallway carried the weight of judgment. To him, everything had to be orderly, logical, and noble in purpose, and a daughter who refused to pursue higher education, like me, was clearly a flaw to be corrected. My mother, Margaret, wasn't much different. She was the principal of the city's largest public high school. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. One stern glance was enough. When I was little and brought home a B instead of an A, she never asked why. She simply tore up the test paper and placed a new SAT prep book on the table. In that household, Emily was the shining standard. My older sister was the family jewel, the pride of the Miller name. By age 3, she was reading children's books fluently. By 5th grade, she was writing essays fit for 8th graders. The whole town spoke of Emily with unhidden admiration, as if she were living proof of natural brilliance. And that made every deviation from the norm, including me, a regret. I didn't resent her, truly. Emily never intentionally made me feel small, but her presence, her perfection in our parents' eyes, became an unspoken mirror I could never reach high enough to see myself in. I was different. While other kids obsessed over textbooks, I tinkered with old electronics from the neighbor's garage. At 8, I took apart an old printer to understand how it worked and got it running again, only to be punished by my father for destructive behavior. "Girls don't need to understand that kind of stuff," my mother said as I tried to explain how the control chip was still functional. "Just study math, English, and biology. Leave this nonsense to the boys." I stayed silent. I wasn't old enough yet to argue, but inside me, something began to stir, a sadness tinged with helplessness. When I was 11, I built a basic website to post my online journal. I showed it to my mom, hoping she'd be proud. She glanced at the screen and asked, "Is this going to help your grade on next week's social studies paper?" I learned to stop sharing. Every small project was dismissed as a waste of time, useless for your college application. I ended up hiding lines of code inside my history notebooks, staying up late to study programming through free online tutorials. To my family, I was the stubborn child, always doing things my own way, refusing to walk the paved path. I wasn't good at biology, didn't enjoy reading political theory, and had no interest in applying to the Ivy Leagues like my sister. Every family dinner became a silent lecture about Emily's achievements. "Your sister was just appointed lead researcher for biomedical studies at Johns Hopkins. Uncle Howard says Emily should apply for the Fulbright. They're very impressed with her resume." And me? "Cora, how many more times are you planning to retake the SAT before you stop embarrassing yourself?" Or worse, complete silence. On the rare occasion I was mentioned, it was as an example of what not to do. My father would look straight at me and say, "This family doesn't raise mediocrity. If you don't want to, do something meaningful. At least don't drag the rest of us down." I wasn't angry, just tired. When I applied for a national high school startup competition, my idea was a platform to help local artisans sell their products online. I prepared everything on my own: financial plans, business model, even a working demo built through drag and drop tools. I won third place out of over 800 entries nationwide. I came home beaming, holding that certificate, thinking maybe they'd finally smile. My father barely glanced at the paper. "This is why your geography grade is slipping." That night, I cried. Not because I was disappointed, but because it became clear that no matter how right I did things, I would never be enough. I started taking small freelance jobs online, designing websites for local bakeries, writing ad copy for flower shops. I never used my parents' credit card. Every single dollar I earned came from working until 2 or 3 in the morning. But no matter how hard I worked, their view of me never changed. Emily once asked me, not out of cruelty, but out of genuine confusion, "Why don't you just take the easier route? Go to college, get a degree, and work at a hospital or some well-known company?" I answered softly, "Because I want to build something of my own." She nodded, but I could see the gap in her eyes, a gap no words could bridge. Still, I kept going. Not because I wanted to prove anything to anyone, not because I wanted to outshine Emily, but because I had no other choice than to live honestly with myself. And that, eventually, led me into a world none of them ever imagined I'd reach. I stayed quiet for a long time. Through all those years under that roof, I never once raised my voice at my father. Not because I feared him, but because I knew that in his world, I could never win with words. Every disagreement turned into a cold lecture. Every discussion, a courtroom where emotions were weakness and difference was a defect to be corrected. I used to believe that if I stayed obedient, worked hard in silence, he might one day realize I wasn't as useless as he thought. But that day never came. When my father began organizing my college applications, Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, he never asked what I wanted to study. He simply placed a thick folder in front of me and said, "You have 2 choices, medicine or law. Both are respectable paths. Pick one." I looked him straight in the eye. I wasn't angry, just calm, strangely calm, as if I was finally peeling off a mask I'd worn too long. "I'm not picking either." He put the pen down. "What did you just say?" "I'm not going to study law, and I'm not going into medicine either. I'm not applying. I want to start my own business. I already have a plan, my first client, and almost $4,000 from designing websites over the past year." Silence filled the kitchen. My mother, mid-motion reaching for the salad, froze. The spoon slipped from her hand and clattered onto the porcelain plate with a sharp, dry sound. Emily, sitting across from me, looked up, her eyes unreadable, somewhere between shock and pity. My father slowly stood up. He didn't shout, didn't slam his hand down, but his voice was sharp like a blade slipping across the throat. "Not under this roof. You will not destroy what this family has built over 3 generations just to chase some cheap business scheme." "It's not cheap," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm building a platform so that people without tech access can still reach the market. I'm helping people like Aunt Karen with her bakery, and Uncle Louie who sells pottery at the flea market. I'm not falling behind, I'm finding another way." He pointed to the door. "Then take that other way out of here. If you want to stay in this house, tomorrow morning you will rewrite your personal essay for Stanford." I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't explain any further. I went upstairs, grabbed 3 old suitcases and the laptop I had saved for over a year to buy. No one followed me. No one said a word. That night, I left the house I grew up in on my own 2 feet. No hug from my mother, no well wishes from my father, not even a glance of regret from my sister. The apartment I rented was on the 3rd floor of a rundown building in the northern suburbs of Austin. The stairs creaked, the windows leaked air, and the paint peeled off the walls. But at least it was my space. No one was telling me who to be. I placed a small wooden table next to the only outlet in the living room and set up the old monitor I brought with me. A cramped little workspace, but a place where I could think, build, and create something of my own. The next morning, I got up early, made a weak cup of coffee using the one electric kettle I had, opened my laptop, and wrote the first line of code for a project I named Craftline. It wasn't complicated software. I had no team, no funding, no lab, no mentor. Just me and an idea to build a bridge for local artisans and craftspeople being left out of the digital world. During the day, I coded. At night, I sent emails to small local shops introducing my service. No flashy headlines. Just a simple message. I can help you sell your products online without charging for a storefront. Most didn't reply. A few emailed back asking, "What college are you from?" I answered honestly, "I haven't gone to college." Then I'd never hear from them again. A pottery shop in Round Rock responded, "Thanks, but we don't work with freelancers without tech certifications." I didn't blame them. I just made a note, adjusted the demo site to be easier to use, and tried to improve a little every day. At night, I ate instant noodles, hard-boiled eggs, and canned beans. Some nights, I only had enough for a loaf of sandwich bread and a carton of milk. I lived on less than $400 a month. The apartment was always cold. The heater only worked half the time. Some nights, I wore 2 sweaters and covered myself with 3 towels just to sleep. One March afternoon, right after I shipped my first online order for a small handmade candle shop in San Marcos, I dialed my mom's number, not to ask for help, just to hear her voice. She answered, but her tone was as cold as ever. "You still haven't gone back to school?" "I'm still working on my project. It's making progress." "Then don't expect anyone to be waiting for you at home." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there on the peeling floor, phone still in hand, feeling not pain but emptiness. 3 months later, Craftline had 2 real clients. One was Josie, who ran a handmade soap shop I met at a farmer's market. The other was Mr. Walter, a 70-something woodcarver living in Bastrop. Mr. Walter always called me Lucy, even though I corrected him many times. But every month, he sent me $20 to keep the shop running, as he put it. "I don't get this tech stuff, but if you can help me get orders, then great." I smiled, thanked him, and nodded. Because in my heart, it felt like a win no one else saw, but I knew exactly how much it meant. That summer was brutally hot. The heat beat through the window glass, turning my tiny apartment into an oven. I set a small fan in front of me while coding and pressed chilled washcloths to my forehead to survive. I still smiled during video calls with clients, even when the sun soaked the back of my shirt in sweat. Craftline had 3 steady clients then. Each paid a small monthly fee for me to manage their orders, update products, and help with social media posts. None of them had business emails or modern computers. They wrote down their orders by hand, took photos with old phones, and sent them to me through text. I didn't have any automation tools. Everything was manual, but I never saw it as a burden. Every time I saw a new order notification pop up from Josie's or Mr. Walter's shop, it felt like the world still had a corner where I belonged. I began noting down each client's habits. Josie usually updated her products on Tuesday nights. Mr. Walter didn't work Sundays because of church. And Abby, a new client running a candle shop in Fort Worth, liked using light wood backgrounds in her photos because it gives a natural vibe. Those little details helped me feel connected. Even though I hadn't met any of them in person, I understood the way they spoke, how they worked, even the rhythm of their breath when they were stressed. Some nights, I typed until 2 or 3 in the morning. My eyes burned, shoulders ached, and my wrist went numb from moving the mouse nonstop. I used a pillow to prop up the laptop to keep it from overheating, and often had to pause when ambulance sirens echoed from the street below. My meals were so simple. I could list them in one breath: instant noodles, boiled eggs, peanut butter, sandwich bread, discounted apples from the nearby grocery store. I spent nothing beyond bills, rent, internet fees, and a few bucks to keep my site alive. I didn't buy new shoes, even though the soles were worn thin and my heels throbbed every time I climbed the stairs. People around me lived normal lives. They had 9-to-5 jobs, weekends off, coworkers to chat with. I had nothing but a computer screen and a whiteboard filled with sticky notes. One day, while driving to the post office to drop off a few packages for Josie, my old Civic got rear-ended by a small delivery truck while I was stopped at a red light. I wasn't seriously hurt, just a bruised shoulder and a banged-up knee, but the car, the only valuable thing I still owned, wouldn't start again. I sat quietly on the curb, watching the tow truck haul it away. Sweat and blood mixed on my forehead. My phone battery was low. A new hospital bill sat in my wallet, and I didn't dare open it. The repair estimate was $800, an amount I didn't have. I called Josie from a nearby payphone, my voice trembling. "I might be late with your shipment this week. I got into an accident." She didn't ask many questions. Just said gently, "That's okay, Cora. Don't worry. What matters is that you're safe." I thanked her and hung up. But as I stood there alone on the street, I felt something strange I didn't want to give up. That night, I sat on my living room floor, my leg wrapped in gauze, my shoulder throbbing, but I still opened my laptop. I wrote a short email. "Dear Sir, Madam, I'm the founder of Craftline, a platform that helps small craft shops digitize their businesses. I don't have a degree, no departments, but I do have real data, real customers, and the ability to deploy right away. If you know anyone looking for a partner to improve order management or logistics, please give me a chance to present." That night, I sent 117 emails, then fell asleep at the desk without turning off the light. The next day, no replies. The day after that, still nothing. But on the fifth day, around 7 p.m., while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, my phone buzzed. "Hello, Cora. This is Rebecca Tran from the operations department at Maple and Sage. I got your email. Could you send us a demo?" I froze in the sound of running water. In my mind, there was only one word: opportunity. Not wishful hope, but a wake-up call. I opened my laptop, double-checked all customer data, drew out order flow diagrams, redesigned the interface to be simple yet intuitive. Over the next 5 days, I never slept more than 3 hours a night. I borrowed a camera from my neighbor to film a feature simulation. Jared, a sophomore UX design student I'd met at a community meetup, volunteered to help with the interface. I paid him with a Starbucks gift card because I had no cash left. Together, we built a complete demo, showing how a retail chain could track inventory across multiple locations, process orders flexibly, and send automatic notifications. When I sent it off, I wrote in the email, "This is everything I have, built from a small rented apartment by a team of 2 in 5 days. But I believe if given the chance, we can deploy this system with a speed and dedication big corporations can't match." I didn't know how they would respond. But even if they never replied, I had already gone far beyond what my father ever thought possible. That meeting hadn't been in my plans. I stumbled across a notice on the community bulletin board, an event on digital transformation for microbusinesses at the Austin Central Library. I almost skipped it, since those events were usually full of buzzwords and attendees who came just to check a box. But the speaker's name stopped me: Marilyn Carter, founder and former CEO of StratoSync, the small business accounting, the software company I had studied a few years back. I arrived an hour early, sitting in the middle row, clutching my laptop like it was the last safe thing I had. The room wasn't large, maybe 20 people, mostly small shop owners, freelancers, or recent graduates unsure where to begin. Marilyn walked in calmly, silver hair tied back, dressed in a white blouse and dark slacks. Not a single piece of jewelry, no theatrics. Her voice was low and decisive, like someone who had sat through hundreds of meetings, negotiated thousands of contracts, and stumbled enough times that failure no longer scared her. She didn't use slides. Just a marker on a whiteboard, sketching how to think about products, customers, and what she called scalable sustainability. "Creating a tool useful for one person is good," she said. "But how do you take that same tool, serve 10, then 100, while keeping the original value intact. That's when you have a business. I straightened in my seat, eyes fixed on the words she wrote. Systems, not individuals, determine survival. The session ended after nearly 2 hours. People lined up to shake her hand, thank her, then left. I stayed put, waiting until the room emptied, then approached as she gathered her pens and erasers. I'm Cora. She looked up, her eyes not judgmental, just expectant. I nervously pulled a homemade business card from my pocket, rough paper, slightly crooked text. I'm building a platform to help artisans sell online. No funding, no degree, just real data and real users. I'm trying. She held the card with both hands, as if it were something of worth. How many sellers are active? 8. But most are inconsistent. 3 are steady. Where does the revenue come from? I take 5% from each completed order. I also help them run their storefront pages. You're coding it all yourself? Yes, with one student helping with the interface. She stayed, quiet a moment. I opened my laptop, hands trembling, showing her the data I had collected over months. Orders, site traffic, conversion rates, weekly reports. Nothing impressive in size, but consistent and clear. She skimmed, then asked, "Why are you still selling individual products?" I blinked. Because my customers are individuals, end users. No. I mean, why not sell the software itself? I was confused. She leaned closer, pointing at the order flow diagram I had drawn. Instead of chasing individual artisans, think about selling this system to small retail chains. They have multiple locations, employees who need to manage orders and stock. You already have the framework. Just redirect it. I froze. All those nights coding, tweaking the interface, tracking single orders, I'd always aimed at small sellers. I had never considered the system itself could be the real product. But I've never built enterprise software. That's fine. I started just like you, and I learned one thing. The market doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. She pulled a sheet of paper from her bag, writing down her name and personal email. If you're serious about this new direction, send me an update in 2 weeks. Remember, you're not just selling a product, you're building an ecosystem. I bowed my head in thanks, my throat tight with emotion. By the time I left the library, night had fallen. The wind rustled through bare trees, and in it, I heard something I hadn't felt in a long time: belief. Back home, I opened my project plan immediately. I wrote down everything Marilyn had said, then crossed out Craftline in red pen. The name felt too small, too personal. I wrote a new one, Nova Logic Solutions. Nova because I wanted to spark an explosion in the artisan retail industry. Logic because everything should be built on systems, not chance or sentiment. For the next 2 weeks, Jared and I worked as if time itself was burning down. We didn't just rewrite code, we redesigned our way of thinking. No more storefront interfaces for single sellers, but full inventory tracking, supply chain management, shipping integration, and customer behavior analytics. We sketched features on the back of pizza boxes, plastered sticky notes over the walls until the paint disappeared. Some nights Jared collapsed on the couch, mumbling, "Cora, if this software launches, I'll be your UX lead full-time for free for a year." I laughed, sighed, but inside, I knew. We were touching something that truly mattered. Novalogic was born that way from an apartment just over 400 square feet, built by 2 people with no degrees, no backing, and no one standing behind us. And then, on a chilly autumn morning, while I was making coffee, an email from Rebecca Tran appeared with a short subject line: "Need to meet to discuss deployment. Urgent." I sat frozen for a few seconds before opening it. The subject line was so brief, but it made my heart beat unevenly. I pulled up a chair, opened the screen, and my eyes locked on the content. "We need the software deployed within 60 days across the entire Maple and Sage system. Call me back before this afternoon." I picked up the phone with hands still damp from spilled coffee. Jared had just arrived, carrying a bag of bagels from our usual shop. He looked at me and asked slowly, What's going on? I didn't answer right away. I just handed him the phone and whispered, "Get ready." The call with Rebecca lasted only 15 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Her voice was clear, steady, wasting not a second. "We have 36 retail locations across 6 states, and our current system is outdated and fragmented. Can your software integrate with our existing shipping and accounting systems? I'll need access to the API details, then adjust a few modules, but yes, it's fully possible." "Good. Send us an internal simulation by the end of the week. If it meets requirements, we'll sign a full deployment $420,000 with $150,000 wired up front." I couldn't react. The silence stretched until Rebecca repeated, "Are you still there?" "Yes, I accept." Jared jumped the moment I hung up. "Cora, we have to deploy in 2 months?" "There's no other way. There are only 2 of us. Then we'll work like 10. He stayed quiet for a few seconds, then laughed. "Fine. As long as I still get peanut butter sandwiches." We got to work. In the days that followed, the apartment turned into a small battlefield. The dining table became a data center. The living room wall was plastered with system diagrams, sticky notes, and interface designs. Everything was manual, built from sleepless nights and foggy mornings where weekdays blurred together. I hired 2 interns from the local community college. One handled data, checks, the other managed order errors and customer responses. They didn't need much pay, just experience. I was upfront we might not survive the next 3 months. 17 days later, the first demo was finished. A minimal interface, smooth processing speed, clear inventory tracking by branch. Jared added a red alert feature whenever a best-selling item dropped below threshold, and Rebecca called back within an hour. "That alert is smart. Send me the slide. I want to present it to the board." On the day the contract was signed, I stood motionless in front of the screen, unable to speak. Rebecca sent the PDF with one short line, "You did it. Send the invoice." The figure $420,000 lit up in the email like a current running through me. I typed with trembling hands. Not because of the money, but because it was proof. Proof that everything I had endured for years hadn't disappeared into nothing. I didn't cry. I just sat there a long time, staring at the contract text, then stood up and walked around the block. Autumn had come, leaves scattered across the sidewalks. No one knew I had just signed a contract that could change my life, and I didn't need them to know. After the successful Maple and Sage deployment, we were referred to 3 more chains. Each brought its own challenge. One specialized in Appalachian crafts, another sold seasonal home decor, and one organic grocery chain was looking to integrate e-commerce. I didn't turn down a single client. I knew I was walking a tightrope, but opportunities like that don't come twice. Each project forced me to learn something new about intrastate shipping systems, inventory data structures, communication flow between warehouses and stores. I started hiring full-time employees. Rachel, who had managed logistics at Target, joined after hearing about NovaLogic at an industry seminar. Dominic, a seasoned programmer who had retired early, returned part-time because, in his words, "I like working for a small company with both brains and heart." We rented a small office in South Austin. White walls, glass windows looking out onto foot traffic, and a wooden board where every morning I wrote 2 words: "Keep going." 3 months later, we opened a branch office in Denver. And when a major client in California signed a nationwide contract, I flew there to sign in person, standing in a glass-walled boardroom, speaking with 8 people in suits, and feeling like I completely belonged. NovaLogic was officially valued at over $16 million in its first funding round. But I didn't rush to sell shares. I wanted full control, at least until the system was stable. Everything moved fast, relentless, like a wave I couldn't stop. But amid all the contracts, financial reports, demos, and client trainings, one thing kept me awake each night. I was still the person who had once been kicked out with only 3 suitcases and an old laptop. And even while running a multi-million-dollar company, I still ate rye bread. still made my own coffee each morning, still remembered every word my father had said to me, etched into me like scars that never faded. That winter, when my father lost his job, the local papers wrote briefly. The political science department at Texas State University cut staff due to budget shortages. His name, Thomas Miller, it wasn't mentioned, but everyone in the field knew he was on that list. I read that article in my Austin office, holding a cup of cold coffee. My screen still open to a cost comparison chart for a new client in Nevada, but my eyes stayed on that short line, repeating in my head like an empty drumbeat. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel sorrow. Just a strange sense like watching an old tree shed all its leaves overnight in a storm, and realizing I no longer stood beneath its branches. A week later, I accidentally received a bank statement my mother had sent to my old email, the one I had used for college applications. They still used that account with the bank, and I had never canceled the inbox. A red line stood out. Mortgage payment for this month, overdue by 16 days. Below that, medical expenses, totaling more than $1,800, noted, thyroid treatment medication, not covered by insurance. I sat there staring at the screen. No one from the family reached out. Maybe they still believed I was living in some corner, scraping by, incapable of helping. I called my lawyer, Robert Kane, who had helped structure Novologic's legal framework since the beginning. His voice was steady as always, polite, never judgmental. Robert, I need to set up a community education support fund. Call it Spring Haven, and the goal is to support retired or struggling teachers. All paperwork must be legal, but the founder's identity must remain hidden. He was silent for a few seconds, then said, I understand. I'll work with the legal team and deliver the paperwork within 3 days. I also requested the creation of a fake contract under the name Bright Hollow Consulting, an education consulting company registered in Boise, Idaho. Through it, Thomas Miller would receive a monthly payment as if he were the author of a manuscript titled Civic Education in the Modern Era, a document no one but him would ever read. Each month, my father received $2,000 in advance salary through that contract. Spring Haven also sent the bank the full mortgage payment, along with a letter stating that the Miller family had been selected as recipients of support for outstanding contributions to community education. No one asked questions. No one doubted a thing. My father began bragging to his old friends that he was writing a book for a federal education reform program. He called former colleagues, talking about his new contract, as if the day he was removed from the faculty list had never happened. I didn't laugh. I didn't get angry. I simply clicked the confirmation button each month, transferred the money, and went on with the life they still thought was insignificant. A few months later, I learned Emily had given birth to twins. They were named Jacob and Lila. I wasn't told. A former classmate from high school sent me my mother's Facebook post. A short caption, a picture of the babies wrapped in white blankets. Gifts from God. We are so grateful both are healthy. I lingered in the comments. Someone asked, where will you send them to school? I heard you were considering Street Claire bilingual, Emily replied. Yes. But costs went up too much because of the C-section and extended hospital stay. We may have to delay for a few years. I closed the screen, but all afternoon, my mind kept drifting back to two little faces I had never seen in person. 3 weeks later, Street Claire School received 2 scholarship applications from an organization called the Northwest Infant Potential Program. Each was worth $9,500 a year. Both were awarded to Jacob and Lila Winters. No one knew who had submitted the applications. No one questioned it. The paperwork was complete, clear, with recommendation letters from a nonprofit that had previously partnered with the school. Everything was prepared by my legal team. A month later, my mother posted on Facebook, just when you think there's no way, another door opens. We are thankful for every miracle that comes to our family. I read those lines on a flight to Denver for a new client meeting, holding a cup of unsweetened black tea. I didn't feel noble. I only felt tired. 3 years passed. I had spent more than $120,000 to keep my family from collapsing. From the quiet suburban house, to my mother's monthly medication, to my father's nominal salary, to tuition for two children I had never held, I never signed my name. Not one thank you was sent to me. They lived as if an invisible hand was holding everything in place, never wondering whose hand it was, and I didn't need them to know. Only on nights alone in the office, when the team had gone and most lights were off, did I let myself breathe slower and stare at the glass window reflecting the glow of the building across the street. I reminded myself, some affections don't need recognition to exist, and some sacrifices don't need to be named to matter. I didn't do it because my family believed in me. I did it because I was once a 14-year-old girl standing by a classroom window, clutching a programming notebook hidden under my jacket, hoping someone would say my dream made sense. No one ever said that, but today, I could be the one keeping their house from sinking. And for me, that was enough. That Thanksgiving, rain poured from early morning. I drove a rental car from the airport back to my old home in Salem, wet streets reflecting dim, lights like drifting streams of memory. The car stopped in front of the gate where I once stood, trembling with suitcases, leaving. Now, I returned not because I needed a place in that house, but because I carried the truth they had never been ready to face. In my bag was a full printout of the contract signed with Maple and Sage, a valuation report from a Boston investment firm offering to buy NovaLogic for more than $45 million. Transfer records from Springhaven Foundation, the fake Bright Hollow consulting contract with my father, and scholarship confirmations for Jacob and Lila. Each paper was a quiet fragment of the years I had stood in the shadows to keep their house from falling. My mother opened the door. She wore an old wool robe, still holding a ladle, saying out of habit, "Come in, it's cold." No questions, no embrace. My father sat at the table, back straight, holding the New York Times business section. My eyes caught the headline, Tech Valley sees strong growth after pandemic. Emily was already there, white blouse crisp as if she could walk into surgery at any moment. Matthew was taking off his coat, while the twins giggled, running around the table. "Cora's here," my mother announced, like stating something unavoidable. I nodded slightly, placed my bag on the chair near the fireplace. The house smelled of herbs and baked butter, mixed with a quiet tension everyone felt but no one named. Dinner began at exactly 6 p.m., as it always had. My mother stood first, raising her glass of wine. We're grateful the family can still gather. Even as each of us goes in different directions, there are always things to give thanks for. I held my glass of water, saying nothing. My father stood next, his expression as stern as if he were lecturing at the podium. We're fortunate to have a skilled doctor in the family. Emily not only serves the hospital but also stands as a role model for the next generation. And Matthew, the ideal son-in-law, has stood by our daughter through every trial. The children, Jacob and Lila, are developing beyond expectations, just as we hoped. I listened to each word like familiar cuts of a knife, not one mention of me, sitting right at the table. I drew a slow breath, then reached for my bag, pulling out the folder, placing it on the table. "Before we eat, I'd like to share a few things." Emily narrowed her eyes. My father raised an eyebrow. I pulled out the cover page, laying it in front of them. It was the center spread of TechBridge Weekly, with the headline bold and clear, NovaLogic, the tech solution redefining supply chains for America's artisan businesses. In the center was my photo, wearing a black blazer, hair tied back, smiling softly. My father picked up the magazine, flipping through as if searching for signs of forgery. "Where did you get this?" "From my own life." He set the paper down, his eyes sharp as glass. "Don't play games." "How? Could someone without a college degree lead a tech company? Who did you hire to make these printouts?" I didn't answer. I simply opened the next set of documents. Last year's financial reports, independent audit confirmations, signed contracts with retail chains. Since the day you lost your job and mom needed treatment, every mortgage payment, every medical bill, every tuition fee for Jacob and Lila, I've been the one sending the money. I laid out the confirmation letter from Springhaven, the bank statements, and the contract from Bright Hollow. Bright Hollow never existed beyond paperwork. Every month I authorized those transfers as advance salary so you wouldn't feel like a failure. I never asked for gratitude. But tonight, I need to make this clear. Everything this family has managed to hold on to for the past 3 years didn't come from miracles. My mother's hands shook. Emily's eyes widened, unblinking. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough. Are you trying to humiliate me? Do you think a few dollars and some cheap tricks can build a fairy tale? You're a fraud. I looked straight into his eyes. It doesn't matter if you believe me. The truth doesn't need your approval to exist. I stayed silent only to preserve your pride. But tonight, I don't need to hide anymore. My mother whispered, almost trembling. Cora, if this is true, why didn't you tell us sooner? I turned toward her. Because every time I spoke, you looked away. Because I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't a lawyer, so everything I did was dismissed as nonsense. I helped because I still cared. Not because I needed recognition. Emily leaned back, her voice edged with bitterness. I've worked endless shifts at the hospital. Research, study, years of sacrifice to earn my place. And you just sit there writing code and suddenly you're a CEO. It's absurd. I didn't turn to her. Your struggle, I've never denied. But I also fell asleep on a keyboard, lived in an apartment without heat, survived on instant noodles just to save every dollar. No one cleared the path for me either. My father shot up, face crimson. You are the disgrace of this family. A liar, fabricating illusions, exploiting pity. Don't think money can buy respect here. I stood too, my eyes dry, my voice steady. Then from today on, this house will not receive another cent from me. The mortgage agreement will be terminated. Bright Hollow will cancel every payment. The scholarships for the children will not be renewed. I've kept everything afloat without asking for anything in return. But I will not continue supporting people who don't see me as part of this family. I gathered the documents, slid them into my bag, and walked toward the door. My mother stammered. Cora, then, what about next month? I stopped, not turning back. The person you call a fraud cannot continue being the one keeping this family alive. I opened the door and stepped out into the biting drizzle. The rental car waited by the curb. I climbed in, holding back tears that hadn't yet fallen. I wasn't leaving a home. I was freeing myself from the shadow that had bound me for years. I left Oregon the next morning, a nonstop flight from PDX to Tampa at 6:15 a.m. I sat by the window, watching the gray sky above layers of thick clouds, my heart lighter than on any trip I'd ever taken. There were no texts, no calls asking me to stay. My phone buzzed only once as the plane leveled out. Rachel had sent the valuation report from the Boston investors NovaLogic, had just been assessed at $59.7 million, not including the AI module scheduled for release next quarter. I set the phone down, closed my eyes. For a moment, I didn't want to think about the company's worth or contracts. I just pictured the White House with red tile roof in Clearwater, the one I had bought 3 years ago but never truly lived in. I called it the reserve silence of my life. The villa stood by the bay, behind a row of small houses tucked under palms. When the car stopped at the iron gate, I stepped out, dragging my suitcase, inhaling deeply. The sea breeze carried a salty freshness mixed with lavender and wild grass from the backyard. I punched in the code, entered the sunlit grounds, and felt as if I were stepping into another chapter no longer in hiding. During the first week, I hired Elena, a local interior architect, to redesign the entire inside. I wanted to erase the sterile white paint of a rental property and replace it with natural wood, linen, frosted glass, and warm lights. The artwork on the walls would be my own photos from trips to Utah and Colorado, not soulless prints from a catalog. I spent 3 straight days choosing plants: lavender, sage, licorice, and 3 large hibiscus bushes planted along the fence to block the wind. The office faced the sea, a raw, wooden desk, a caramel leather chair. Each morning I opened the door, heard the waves crash, watched sunlight spill across the glass, and felt as though years of dust had finally lifted. I officially established Novologic's new headquarters in a glass building in the West Bay Business District. Ninth floor, southeast corner, looking out over the horizon and the endless blue of the Gulf of Mexico. I flew back to Portland only once, to meet the core team. In our final meeting before relocating, I stood at the whiteboard, looking at each person who had written code with me, fixed bugs, sketched interface diagrams with worn-out markers. We're not just moving offices, we're leaving behind the shadow of where we started. 3 volunteered to come with me: Jared, Rachel, and Dominic. They rented apartments near the harbor, biked to work in the mornings, ate fresh seafood, and drank light beer in the evenings on the office patio. We worked harder than ever, but no longer on sofas or walls covered in sticky notes. Everything was in rhythm, now specialized departments, clear processes. I hired 8 more employees, all people once rejected by big companies for lacking degrees or polished resumes. I only needed attitude, not transcripts. From hallway conversations came the idea for Forge Path Foundation, a fund offering financial support and mentorship to young people with viable business ideas but no education or networks. I drafted the proposal on a Friday night, after Jared told me about a friend who had lost the chance to open a pottery shop because she couldn't secure a starter loan without a guarantor. I wrote the headline: "No one should be judged by the places they haven't been, but by what they dare to create." ForgePath didn't look at GPA, didn't ask for professor references or extracurricular lists. We just read the proposals and spoke directly with the founders. The first applicant was Alicia Monroe, 22, from El Paso. I wanted to build a platform for scheduling medical appointments at local clinics. After watching her mother struggle to call 3 different offices just to book one GI exam, I called Alicia. In our video chat, her voice trembled. "I only have a high school diploma. I don't know how anyone would believe I can build this." I looked straight at the screen. "Maybe no one ever has. But you were strong enough to get this far. And now, there is someone who does believe." She broke down crying. I didn't stop her. I just sat quietly, letting the tears run their course. Alicia received a $20,000 grant, along with 6 months of technical mentorship from my team. I still haven't told anyone about her, but I pinned her photo on the workboard in my office, with a handwritten note: "The one who laid the first foundation." At a Florida startup community networking event, I met Daniel Hayes, a consultant for nonprofit projects, specializing in connecting rural areas with major organizations. Daniel didn't ask where I studied. He didn't ask how much revenue my company made. He just listened when I spoke about Forge Path, then replied in a calm, steady voice: "We need more people like you, Cora." I smiled. The world needs fewer left behind, not more celebrated. 3 weeks later, we had dinner at a small Thai place by the coast. No talk of funding rounds, no mention of company valuations. We just shared stories about childhood meals, half-forgotten songs, and how sitting in silence listening to waves could be its own form of healing. Daniel didn't ask what I'd been through. He only said, "The quieter someone is in the face of insults, the more they need a place where they can exhale freely." I looked at him and realized, for the first time in years, I had stepped into a room without needing to build a wall. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to endure. I didn't need someone to rescue me. I just needed someone quiet enough to listen. And Daniel, somehow, stood exactly in that place, not interfering, not reshaping me, just standing beside me. And that, for me, was enough. I was brewing tea in the kitchen one still March afternoon when the phone rang. The screen flashed, Emily. That name still weighed heavy on my chest each time it lit up. I hesitated for a second before pressing accept. On the other end was the sound of quick breaths. Maybe she had been crying, or was trying hard not to. "Cora, are you doing well?" I leaned back against the stone counter, looking out into the backyard where sunlight fell across lavender in full bloom. "I'm fine," I said shortly. A long pause. "I know I have no right to intrude, but I need to say this." Her voice was hoarse and slow, as if each word dragged through a throat filled with unsaid things. I was jealous of you. So jealous that every time Mom said your name, it felt like something that should have been mine was being stolen. I stayed silent. I kept thinking you were destroying everything. Dad's expectations, the family's pride. But when I read the article about Nova Logic, when I saw you on stage in Clearwater last week, I realized I had never understood you, never even tried. I heard her take a deep breath. I'm sorry. Not because you're wealthy, or because you secretly supported the family, but because I never treated you as someone with the right to be different. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. What did you think when Mom said I dropped out to start a business? I thought you were being childish, that you were embarrassing the family. And now? I don't dare think anything anymore. I just want if there's ever a chance for you to let me try to make something right. Not so you'll forgive me, but so I can learn how to love you the right way. I leaned against the window, eyes fixed on the light, outside. Inside me, memories once sharp softened, like scars turning to tender new skin. Thank you for being honest. But I don't need penance. I just need respect. If one day you truly want to meet me, don't come with pretty words. Come ready to listen. Her voice cracked. Where are you? Clearwater. If you're ready, I'll be at the Shoreline Cafe, Friday, 9 a.m. I ended the call. No expectations, no fear. Just the act of opening a door. 3 days later, I received an envelope from Salem. Heavy cream paper, tidy handwriting I knew well from essays he once corrected. A letter from my father. Dear Cora, I have sat before this page many evenings, but never with the courage to write. Perhaps because I clung to what I thought of as conviction. Or because I didn't want to admit I lost you not through some great upheaval, but through small things I once believed were right. I once thought there was only one path to worth. Scholarship, degrees, reputation in the field. You didn't choose that path, and I never asked why. I recall family dinners when you sat silent, eyes not angry, only distant. I thought you were stubborn. Now I understand. You were only trying to hold on to your true self in a house where no one saw it. I don't dare ask forgiveness. But I want you to know, if I ever have the chance to meet again, I will come not as the father who judged, but as an old student sitting before the maturity he once failed to see. Sincerely, Thomas Miller. I read it over and over, without tears. But my throat tightened with something soft and hard all at once. Not relief. Not sorrow. More like the breath after holding it too long. I wrote back a small note, mailed the next day. Thank you for writing. If you want to see me, the only condition is respect. I don't need a speech. I need a real conversation. I chose the Shoreline Cafe, by the sand, where the sea breeze blew just strong enough that no word could be a bruise. Lie. I arrived early, ordered a cold brew, sat on the porch beneath the faded white awning, watching palm trees sway. At exactly 9, they appeared. Mom in a pale floral dress, hair tied neatly at the nape. Dad slower, shoulders more sunken than the year before. They stood at the table a few seconds without speaking. I stood. No embrace. Just a nod. We sat down, ordering nothing more than 2 cups of hot tea. The silence at first wasn't avoidance. It was as though the cracks needed to be seen clearly before anyone tried to patch them with words. Dad spoke first. I read your interview in Founders Weekly. Impressive is too weak a word for what I felt. I smiled, said nothing. Mom placed her hand on the table, voice quiet. Maybe you don't need us anymore. And maybe that's right. But if even a part of you still wants to keep us, then I'm here. I looked into her eyes. No old defenses, no pride. Only a woman trying to untie knots she had once pulled too tight. I'm not meeting you to ask for a family. I just want to know, after everything, that I can walk in without having to bow my head. Dad nodded, slow and firm. He pulled out a slip of paper, but didn't hand it to me. You once asked me, if you weren't the pride of the family, what did I see? Today I have an answer. I saw the truth, and I was wrong. I didn't need to hear more. We sat for another 20 minutes, talking about the new seaside park, about the twins learning to draw, and about how spring in Clearwater carried a gentler taste than anywhere else. When we left the cafe, My mother lightly put her arms around me. Not too tight, no tears, but long enough that I knew she was hugging me, not the expectations she had once built in her mind. They left afterward. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I only walked down to the sand, slipped off my shoes, let my feet sink into the small waves, and felt my heart as calm as water, no longer stirred by the winds of the past. That evening, I chose a simple ivory linen dress, light enough not to dim the sunlight stretching across the backyard lawn. The scent of jasmine and lavender drifted gently in the air. Rows of round tables draped in white cloth had been set beneath canopies. Strings of small lights hung above like steady heartbeats, warm enough, clear enough to remind me I was living where I truly belonged. Guests came from many places. Friends who had been with me since the days I worked in a rented garage in San Diego, Novologic's earliest mentors, a few close partners from the founding team. But what moved me most were the young people from Forge Path, the ones who, like me once, had stepped out from rough detours where society never laid a red carpet. Elliot, a young man once denied a scholarship just because he lacked a high school diploma, now head of technology at a startup he founded, stood smiling brightly beside me. Alana, a Mexican girl who had lived in a van with her mother, for 3 years now, an interior designer who had helped build the new headquarters in Jacksonville. Next to her was Sarah, the 19-year-old who once emailed me from an internet cafe because she had no computer, now the most outstanding intern in the strategy department. I stepped onto a small stage set up in the yard, where golden lights began to sparkle from strings strung across the treetops. The people around me grew quiet, their eyes on me not because I was the head of a multi-million-dollar company, but because I was someone who understood them from the inside, every crack, every choice no one cheered for, every path dismissed yet never abandoned. I held the microphone, my heart steady. As a child, I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was obedient enough, one day my parents would be proud. They would look at me and say, "You're the greatest thing we've ever had." That day never came, and I suffered for a long time because of it. A few faces lowered. I, too, saw recognition in their eyes, a sadness I didn't need to explain, because they had lived it too. Later, I learned something. Not everyone born under the same roof understands the language of your heart. And you don't need that to grow. What you need is to believe your dream deserves protection even if no one stands beside you. The wind slid through the palms. A paper lantern swayed lightly. I continued. Some have asked me, "Cora, why keep helping people who turned away from you?" And I only have one answer. Because I don't want to carry hatred my whole life. Forgiveness isn't to go back to what was. It's to be free. Daniel, the man sitting under the canopy to my right, nodded gently, his eyes understanding every silence inside my words. He didn't step into my story, didn't try to share the light, but was always there as the quiet anchor I could lean on. I don't have a perfect family, but I have the people standing here. Those who dare to dream, dare to move forward without needing anyone to validate their worth. You are the proof of what I've always believed. I looked toward the group of Forge Path youth. Many had eyes brimming with tears. A few nodded firmly, stronger than any words. Today, we're not celebrating an achievement or a brand. We're gathering for something simpler. Courage. Courage to begin again. Courage to forgive. And courage to build a life you truly want, even when no one drew the path for you. I paused, drew in a breath, then smiled. No one needs to be born into a perfect family to live a full life. What matters is whether you dare to create your own path. Applause rose, not thunderous, but steady and true. I set the microphone down, stepped off the stage. Elliot hugged me first, holding tight without speaking. Alana cried and whispered into my ear, "You gave me a whole world I thought I'd never reach." I only squeezed her hand, saying nothing. A little later, I sat on a bench near the white wooden fence. Daniel came and sat beside me, handing me a cool glass of orange juice with mint. "The woman who stood on that stage," he said softly, "may be the bravest person I've ever met." I smiled, not turning to him. She was also the most wounded person I ever knew. He didn't reply, only reached to hold my hand, gently, as if cradling something that didn't need words to protect. Above Clearwater, the sun began to set, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and purple. I leaned back, eyes still fixed on that light. Not because it was beautiful, but because, after everything, I could finally look up without feeling anything heavy inside. If you've ever felt you didn't belong where you were born, if you've ever been pushed aside no matter how hard you tried, then maybe you understand what I had to overcome to sit here among people not tied to me by blood, but who are the family I chose. I'm not telling this story to blame or to be pitied. I'm telling it because I believe many out there are struggling between the hunger for recognition and the ache of being dismissed. Maybe you're someone silently sacrificing for loved ones, never hearing a thank you. Maybe you're quietly building a dream everyone calls foolish. Or maybe you're standing at the edge between forgiving and moving on. I don't have perfect advice for you. I only have this to share. No one can take away the truth of your worth unless you let them. And sometimes, forgiveness doesn't need to be seen by others. It only needs to set you free. What do you think of my story? Have you ever gone through something that changed the way you see family, yourself, or the meaning of freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to listen and connect with those walking the same path I once walked. And if you want to keep following real, heartfelt stories about family, betrayal, resilience, and endings that bring healing, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapters. We have much more to share on the journey where everyone deserves to find where they belong.